Hey guys, so tonight I'm going to do a video on how to wire off-road lights or any kind of 12 volt automotive accessory that you have in mind, such as backup alarms or what have you. And I'm also going to go over the proper types of wire, tools, connectors, and basically two different ways that you could wire up your lights or whatever you want to wire up. So to start, I'm going to go over wire. Now, first off, I'd like to mention that your car or your vehicle runs on a 12 volt DC, which stands for direct current system. And when you're using DC, it's important to have the proper type of wire. Now, the wire on the left here, this is something I picked up at Home Depot. And if you look at this wire closely, it's solid, meaning it doesn't have any strands. And this type of wire would primarily be used for wiring inside your house or an AC type of wiring situation, because the AC current flows better over the solid, or it flows just fine over the solid core wire. However, with DC, that's not the case. When wiring up automotive accessories, it's important to have automotive wire. So this is 14 gauge automotive primary wire, and what makes it good for automotive work is because it has multiple strands, as you can see. And what that does, that basically allows the DC or direct current to flow easier over the line. I'm not an electrician and I don't completely understand how it works, but that's basically how it works. So yeah, we have a red 14 gauge primary line. That's going to be our supply line. And it's also a good idea to pick up a roll of black line that you can use as your negative or grounding line. So next thing I'm going to go over is tools. So you're absolutely going to need a pair of basic automotive stripper, or rather a basic pair of wire strippers at the least. And these are pretty simple the way they work. If you look at the head here, they have a variety of numbers. So you select the whatever gauge wire you're using. So say we're using the 16 gauge wire here and we want to strip the end off of that. You're going to go to the 16 gauge wire hole. And basically how this works, you open it up and you put it in there, and basically it cuts off the protective coating around the core of the wire. And so basically you close it down on the right hole, you give it a little twist, and you hold the wire with one hand and you hold the tool with the other, and basically you peel off the protective coating. So that's pretty simple. Also, another function of this tool, it is also a crimping tool. If you look at the bottom here, so when we get into our crimping connectors, you'll understand how that works. So just also wanted to show you a I'd almost call it an easier tool for stripping wire, but it does not have a crimping feature. And basically the way this one works, same idea, it still has a variety of holes for different gauges of wire. But what's nice about this wire stripper is what it does, you put the wire in the proper hole, it'll cut the wire first, and then it will, well, this one doesn't work too well actually, but what it does, it's supposed to clamp down on the wire, or cut the wire core, or not the core, it's supposed to cut the protective coating, then clamp down on the back of the wire, and then spread, so in effect stripping the protective coating off the wire in one fair swoop. So again, this is my crappier one. I have my good one out in my truck, so just to give you an idea on the types of tools you can have. Next thing I'm going to go over real quick is connectors. It's a good idea to get a good set. It's a good idea to get a good set of automotive connectors. Now, the connectors that we're going to really be using here, and likely that you're really going to be using, this is just basically a female receiver connector. I don't know the exact name, but you can get an idea. It's also important to have these, I guess I'd call this a terminal connector. These are excellent for connecting to your battery, where your battery terminals screw on. I also have a couple different sizes, some smaller ones. So those are great to have. And also, when you want to connect two stripped wires, these are also pretty important. And basically the way these work is you put the stripped wire on either side and then you crimp down on each side, and that basically makes the line into one piece. And now there is another way to connect two bare lines as opposed to these crimp connectors, and that's basically to solder them together and then basically slide a piece of heat shrink tubing over it. And that really is a little bit better and more professional of a connection, but you know, you don't have to do it. I always try to, you know, use heat shrink tubing, but when I'm trying to do something fast, I'll just use these crimp connectors and they work fine. So yeah, and I've been calling them crimp connectors because basically all you do, you insert your stripped wire in the end, and then you go to the crimping feature on our wire stripper, and basically you crimp them down, and that basically crimps this tube in here, and that'll pinch down on your wire, and that's basically how it connects. So that's pretty simple. Next, you know, figure out what you're wiring. You know, I just threw my automotive or my off-road light out here so you get an idea on what can be wired up. Just have a self-tapping screw. I'm going to go over that when we get into grounding. A fuse, three-prong switch, and this is a relay. This is what a relay looks like, and we're going to go over that in a minute. Okay, so now in front of you I have two different options or two different ways that you can wire your off-road lights or accessory. One is, I'm just going to call this a standard hard wire, and this I'm going to call this a relay wired system, and we'll go over each of them right now. So this, we're going to start with the hard wire, whatever you want to call it, the hard wire circuit. So basically, again, we talked about our cars run on 12 volt DC, and basically you have, every car has a battery. And the way the battery works, you have a positive red terminal and a negative black terminal. Now, on all modern cars pretty much, the negative terminal is grounded out to your chassis or your frame. And this symbol right here just represents that it's a grounded out line, or the black line, or the negative line. So, basically in order for your light to work, you need to have a complete circuit that the electrical current will run through the positive side to the accessory, and it'll ground out, and that will in turn return back to the negative terminal. Mind you, I'm no electrician or anything, but you know, I'm doing the best I can to explain this. So we've gone over that. Now, when wiring, I'd say one of the most important things to do whenever you're wiring any kind of aftermarket accessory is to put a fuse as close to the positive terminal as possible. And the reason you want to do that is because, say I didn't have a fuse in this line, and say for whatever reason my electrical line got nicked, or it got peeled back, or it got damaged of some sort. And say that line were to touch bare metal, because this is grounded out to the frame, and when this line touches any bare metal, what that will cause, it'll cause sparking, and it'll basically create what's called a short circuit. And that's where the electrical current cuts short of our accessory, and basically as opposed to going all the way through our system and into our accessory, it's going to short, so it'll create a loop right back into the battery. And the danger with that is it causes sparking or arcing, one, and that can be a major fire hazard. Secondly, when you connect this line directly back to the negative terminal, a huge amount of current is going to want to flow through that line, and it's going to get so hot that it will melt the protective coating on your wire, and again, it's just a fire hazard. So it's really important to install a fuse as close as you can to the positive terminal of your battery. And the next thing you're going to want to do after you wired your line from the positive terminal to your fuse, you're going to want to install a switch. That way you can turn on or off your accessory. Now, for automotive switches, there are really two types of switches. There's three-pronged and there's two-pronged switches. In front of you, I have a three-pronged switch. And the reason it has three-pronged switch, or the reason it, excuse me, the reason there's three prongs is on this particular switch, and all switches that have three prongs, they'll have some type of LED or incandescent indicator light to let you know, hey, that there's power flowing through the switch. So this is our supply line, and that will go to one terminal that's coming off the battery. And then we have another terminal, and that will go to our accessory. And then this switch is also grounded out. And basically, the reason it's grounded out is that way it supplies power and it creates a circuit to our indicator light on our switch. Now, a two-prong switch, it will not have the grounding feature and it won't have any type of light. And also, you could wire a three-prong switch to just complete the circuit without turning on the light. All you would do is just not wire up the grounding feature on that particular switch. So, we've gone over the switch. So, again, we have our supply line and then our switch line, which goes to our accessory. So you're going to wire that terminal up to your light or whatever you want to wire it up to. And then basically you're going to ground that out. So in turn, it's going to create a complete circuit. So it's going to come up, our power is going to be supplied from the battery in through our protected line with our fuse into the switch. If we flip the switch on, we'll supply power to the light, that will ground out, and that will create the complete circuit back to the negative terminal on the battery. Now, just real quick, I'll mention for grounding out or returning the line back to the negative terminal on the battery, there's basically two ways you could do it. You could either take the negative line and you could just attach it to the negative terminal on your battery, or you could use a type of self-tapping screw. This is called a self-tapping screw because it has an auger or a drill on the tip of it, and this will in turn drill through the metal. You know, whenever you're doing a self-tapping screw, it's always important to screw it onto the frame or a significant steel object on your car. That way you know you have a good ground. And basically all you do is just take one of your terminal connectors, you attach your grounding wire on there, and basically you screw it in, and that's good to go. One thing I will mention though, if you ever have problems with your lighting and you do decide to go the self-tapping route, the self-tapping screw route, and you tap your frame where it's underneath the vehicle, it's very common for this to get corroded. So if you ever have any problems with your light coming on, the first thing I would always suspect generally, other than the fuse, is that you have a corroded connection to your ground. So there are types of sprays that do help protect that, but that's just giving you a little heads up as to what some problems may be. So this is a hardwire system, and this system comes with a danger. Now the danger with this system is this isn't connected to the key or the ignition on your vehicle. So the danger is, say you were to leave this switch on and you took your key out and you walked away from your vehicle, this over time will drain your battery. So that's really the danger of this system. And next system we're going to go over is a relay wired system, and basically the advantage of this system. So to start, we've already gone over the battery and the grounding and why it's important to have a fuse, so we're going to skip that part. That part's the same. Next, you'll see here, as opposed to this three-prong switch that we've gotten familiar with, we have a relay. And again, this is what a relay looks like. This is an automotive relay, 4 prongs, and I will include a link below where you can buy one. And so basically, if I cover up this bottom terminal on the relay and you look at the 3 prongs above me, it's basically wired exactly the same as the 3-prong switch. So you have your supply line, a ground. Though this does not have an indicator light, the reason you need to ground it is just for proper operation of this particular switch. And so yeah, we have our supply, our ground, and our line going out to our accessory. Now, the fourth terminal, I'm going to call it a trigger line. And a good way to associate the trigger line with a three-prong switch is the trigger line is basically an electrical switch. So the trigger line basically does the same thing as this toggle does mechanically. And the way that I specifically wired this up for my truck, I know in my truck I have a 2005 F-150, and inside the dash and pretty much every vehicle, when you turn the key on to accessory or turn the ignition on, basically there's a wire, a trigger wire that runs into the back of the radio. And basically whenever you turn the ignition on, power runs through that trigger line that goes to the radio, and it basically tells the radio, hey, keys in the ignition, you know, time to turn on. So what I did, I tapped my trigger line into that same trigger line for the radio. That way, whenever I turn my key on and the ignition on, it will basically turn on this switch. So now what I've done is basically whenever I turn my key on, this will trigger this switch. And now I don't have to worry about my battery getting drained whatsoever as long as I remember to take the key out. So that's basically the advantage of a relay system, and that's why I really like the system so much better than a hardwired system, hardwired system. Now, one other thing that I will mention about wiring up a relay system is, especially with LED lights, hang on, let me take a step back here for a second here. Another way to wire this up, as opposed to your 12 volt or your accessory, or excuse me, your trigger light for your radio, your trigger line for your radio. Yes. Okay, let's just pretend I didn't say that. So let's take a step back again and reanalyze this. Okay, so I mentioned in my truck that there is a line, a trigger line for my radio that I tapped in, and that whenever I turn my key on and my ignition on, again, it will supply power to this and complete this circuit. Another way to wire this, say you want to wire an off-road light that comes on when you turn your high beams on. The way to do that would be, is you'd have to go and take your headlight out, and you'd have to figure out which wire is supplied power when you turn your high beams on. And what you would do, you would take this trigger line and you would attach it to that same wire that supplies power to the high beam bulb. So basically whenever you flick your high beams on, it's going to supply power to this trigger line, and it's going to complete the circuit and supply power to your light. Another way to do this is to wire this trigger line to your reverse lights if you wanted to wire up a backup alarm. So that way, whenever you throw your car into reverse and power is sent to your backup lights, power is also going to be supplied to this switch, or this relay, and that's going to complete the switch and power your backup alarm. Now, one thing I will mention, especially with these LED off-road lights, they can be incredibly jeez, I can't talk. These LED road lights, these LED off-road lights can be incredibly bright. So bright that, you know, sometimes when you're driving in suburban areas where there may be some police presence, that you want to turn them off, because I believe, especially in New York State, technically off-road lighting like that on-road is illegal, as why it's called off-road lighting. So what I have done personally, and I would recommend you do, is I've installed an additional switch right here. And basically what that switch does is it allows me to have my high beams on, but I also have another switch in the line right here. So as we mentioned before, whenever I have my high beams on, it supplies power to this light. And if I don't want this light on when I have my high beams on, then I basically turn off my switch, and that will allow my high beams to stay on, and it will turn off my off-road lights. And again, where you want to wire that switch is in between the line on, or the terminal on the relay going out to your accessory, and in between that terminal and your accessory. And as for wiring these relays, I don't have the exact diagram in front of me, but inside on these terminals, all these terminals will be labeled. If you Google relay wiring diagram, there's you'll get probably a couple thousand different links on basically how to wire this up. And again, there's numbers on the underside that go to each terminal, and basically you match each terminal up with what you find on Google on this system right here. You have your supply line, your ground, to accessory, and your trigger. And I'd say that's basically it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Also below, I will leave links to where you can buy some switches, lighting, or wire. I'll see if I can find a link for a basic wire stripper as well as electrical connectors. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.